Hello. Well, there's been a bit of a fuss about a performer of a type of music called grime, with which I'm really not all that familiar. He's called Stormzy, and there was outrage in the media recently when he purportedly said that Britain was 100% racist. And apparently that's not precisely what he said. And he's getting quite cross about that, which is sort of amusing for reasons which will come up during the course of this video. But anyway, yes, he's quite cross about it being said that he told Britain that every single person in the country was 100% racist, because after all, he's trying to sell his crap to the British public. He's got to allow some of them to feel they're not included in his low opinion. It seems he was talking to an Italian radio station. I think, I know about the Markle catastrophe, which has struck the British royal family. And in that context, he was saying that Markle was hounded out of her royal position by the racism of the British, which is a load of old cobblers, by the way. Hang on, this keyboard is getting in the way. I'm a bit worried I might knock it and stop the recording. Well, anyway, what I was going to say was that Stormzy should know better. Actually, he does know better, because he's an educated man despite his image. So let's just consider. No. First of all, I want to talk about the sort of evil that people do. Because there are categories of evil. To my mind, correct me if you think I'm wrong, there are three main categories. One is the impulsive evil, when somebody does an evil act which has dreadful consequences, but it only happens the once, and they themselves subsequently live reasonable lives, possibly rescuing kittens and shopping for an elderly neighbour, that sort of thing, an honest life mostly, but on that one occasion they've done something awful on an impulse. I was thinking of that particularly because of a situation that happened after East Germany fell. There were a lot of stored documents in the Stasi offices, and some came to light dating back to Nazi times. I saw a programme in which a reporter tracks down a woman who, as a teenager in Nazi Germany, wrote a letter to the local authorities denouncing a neighbour for being a lesbian. The neighbour was arrested and shipped off to a concentration camp, which she did not survive. This woman was, by that time, the woman who was interviewed was an ordinary German pensioner who was completely flummoxed by the letter when it was shown to her. She said that, yes, it was her handwriting. She wasn't trying to deny what she'd done, but she said that she didn't remember actually writing it. And it's obviously the sort of evil committed by a spiteful teenager who wasn't really thinking through the consequences of her actions. After she was reminded of it, I hope she was tormented enough by her past cruelty to regret what she'd done. But however terrible the consequences, assuming that she lived an upright life thereafter, that one act of evil doesn't make her an evil person. It makes her a person who did an evil act. It's not quite the same thing. The second sort of evil person is someone who does evil because he or she is mentally ill. People with psychosis, perhaps, or schizophrenia. Sometimes the demons that drive such people do not confine themselves to torturing the mind of the victim, but will spill outward to destroy lives of people surrounding the victim as well. It's easy to call such people evil, and certainly if you've been on the receiving end of the evil, which may result from a pernicious type of such madness, you would have every right to regard it as evil. But objectively, looking at it from the outside, you can't regard the people themselves as evil in the same way that you can't regard a man as a murderer if he had a life-threatening disease and without realising got on a bus and infected and killed several people in the bus. Objectively, mental illness, if it's really mental illness, can't be evil because the victim isn't responsible. That's why the punishment for crimes committed by mentally ill people is not the same as it would be for someone considered sane. But then there's the third type of evil, the one in which an evil act is committed not out of a fit of adolescent pique or as an attack of madness, but as a calculated act, one in which there's full cognizance of the act and the consequences. But the evildoer does it anyway because either he enjoys watching people suffer or jump to his words, or because it profits him in some way. And I'm sorry to have to say this, but I'm of the opinion that Stormzy falls into that category. With the interview he gave in which he spoke about Markle being hounded for her race, that's just about the most evil thing a man could do because he knows it's not true. And what his intention is in what he said is to drive a wedge between different people in this country, possibly because he thinks it'll sell his music, or maybe because it makes him feel more important, or maybe because he wants to absorb some of the kudos of victimhood, who knows. But it's evil, and it's knowing evil to do that. Let's just examine Meghan Markle. She's an actress. She got where she got by being pushy. You don't make your way in the cutthroat and viciously immoral world of the media by being a retiring wallflower. Nearly all the big stars in acting would have to be at least a little bit narcissistic. And I'm talking about the psychiatric definition, by the way. What is narcissistic personality? Someone who thinks the world revolves about him or herself. Someone who thinks their feelings, their ambitions, whatever, are more important than anything to do with anyone else. All right, and so Merkel is going to be, by definition, a pushy sort of person. It was hoped, I'm sure, by everyone who was happy at Harry's marriage to Meghan Markle that she would use her acting skills to act the royal part. That's what I thought. Other members of the royal family have learnt to act out their parts, although for the most they would have learnt it over the years, whereas we all knew it was going to be difficult for Markle because it would be a steeper learning curve. And people would be prepared to offer her some leniency in their judgment of her when she made mistakes. However, most of us thought she'd manage it, but it didn't turn out like that. And it wasn't racism. And for an example, I shall draw your attention to another member of the royal family who got a lot of public disapproval, and that's Princess Michael of Kent. I have to explain first, she's called Princess Michael because when a woman who's not royal marries a prince, she takes the title of her husband, having no right to a royal title of her own. So the real name of Princess Michael of Kent is Marie Christina Anna Agnes Hedwig Ida von Reibnitz. She's just about as German as you can get. Well, Hungarian too, I believe. But she was outspoken, made a number of social faux pas, spoke her mind when she shouldn't, and she incurred the wrath of the entire British public. And she's still not all that popular, even after years of relative silence. But it would be ridiculous to say that her low approval ratings have anything to do with her race, as it has nothing to do with Markle's race. This whole business has absolutely nothing to do with race, and Stormzy knows that. And here's the big joke. Stormzy is really upset about the media spinning his words. Here, let's see. I'm just going to pull this down. Here we are. Stormzy hits back at media for intentionally spinning my words over racism comment. Yep. Stormzy has hit out at media outlets he accused of intentionally spinning my words for some clickbait after comments he made in an interview about racism in the UK were misrepresented by various publications. So let's see what he said. This is a screenshot. It's not, it's a picture of the tweet. So I can't highlight the words the way I would with a PDF or a browser. But this is what he said. So he was asked, now look, do you think Britain is still racist? Stormzy, definitely 100%. Okay? Now, as I say, Stormzy is an educated man, despite his image, and he knows very well the effect of those words. Now, let's go on to something else he said. I think with Boris, if you have a figurehead, oh, look, I can do this. That's not so good. If you have a figurehead, if the top person can only say this racist thing, that racist, this racist thing, that racist thing, the Pickaninny's remarks, it's been misspelt, watermelon, oh, that didn't work too well, watermelon smiles, you're going to have to live with that, folks. Okay, I think with Boris, if you have a figurehead, if the top person can only say this racist thing, that racist thing, the Pickaninny's remarks, watermelon smiles, okay. But did he say that? As I said, Stormzy knows exactly what Boris Johnson said, and I'm going to put it up here. This is an article in The Spectator. All right. Boris Johnson and the Pickaninny smear, and it's by Brendan O'Neill, and this was written in November 2019. Does Boris really call black people Pickaninnies? The distinct impression we've been given by Corbynistas and Boris bashers over the past few months is that Pickaninnies is Boris's go-to name for black people. Owen Jones, always a good man to go to for the truth, even thinks broadcasters should ask Boris, does he still believe that black people should be called Pickaninnies with watermelon smiles? All right. This particular accusation against Boris is staggeringly dishonest. It's either being made by people who haven't read the 17-year-old Daily Telegraph column in which Boris used that word, whose ignorance might be forgivable, or by people who did read it, whose cynical misrepresentation of Boris's words absolutely must not be forgiven. Let's see, it was an anti-imperialist article, almost the precise opposite of what we've been led to believe. The target of Boris's flowery ire in that column wasn't black people, it was the globe-trotting and imperious Tony Blair and even, sorry ma'am, the Queen. Let me explain. The column was published at the height of the cult of Tony Blair, Tony Blair. Not quite as cuddly as all that. This was pre-Iraq, but post-Afghanistan and post-Kosovo. So Blair was still being effusively praised by silly, soppy liberals for his rehabilitation of the civilising mission of British interventionism and for jetting around the world to fix other nations' problems. The column that Boris wrote is headed, "If Blair's so good at running the Congo, let him stay there." It's a stinging criticism of Blair for marching around the world while domestic problems in the UK were growing. Boris depicted Blair in his taxpayer-funded jet descending to bring his particular brand of humbug to the troubled spots of the world. He mocked Blair and Cherie, his wife, for shining the light of their countenances upon the people of Afghanistan. And then he mentioned pickaninnies. He landed a blow on the Queen. He said one of the reasons she loves the Commonwealth is because it supplies her with regular cheering crowds of flag-waving pickaninnies. And here we are. And as Boris then said, the then PM was no doubt hoping for big watermelon smiles when he touched down in the Congo. Watermelon smiles for the big white chief in his big white aeroplane. And as O'Neill says, it's as plain as day. The target of Boris's words was not African people, it was Blair and the Blairite brand of moralistic interventionism and Blair's view of himself as a big white chief saving the tragic peoples of the third world from themselves. All right, and Stormzy knew that. And then you get people like Stormzy complaining that his words have been spun out of context as clickbait. This is a man who's quite prepared to peddle a lie about our Prime Minister and accuse the British people of racism, while he cries that it's not fair when people do level the same sorts of lies and unjustified accusations at him. And you want to know something? I'm not too sure that this definitely 100%. I wonder if I can do that line again. Let's see. Well, anyway, definitely 100% actually did mean only that he agreed with it 100%, which is what he says. He's a wordsmith, and his rap lyrics, I find many of them objectionable and very opaque, but there's no doubt he's a wordsmith. And he must have known about the possibility for a dual meaning on this answer here. I think he was making it deliberately ambiguous. And then when he realised the kickback he was going to get, he's now started backpedaling and acting all hurt about it. Well, it doesn't work with me, because whatever he says he said, the fact is he can't stop talking about race because it gets him a following. He says racism is worse under Johnson. Let's see if I can find that. Here we are. So now people are more vocal. There's hate in the street. People say go back home. Well, I've not heard that. So you mean that now more people feel entitled to hate? Yes, they feel encouraged. It's like Trump. Before, people had to hide their racism. If you felt something bad about black people, about Muslims, you had to shut up. Now these people have confidence to come out in public, to say everything. This is scary to me. I don't think it is. Scares the shit out of me as a black. Boris Johnson, he's not afraid to say anything because he feels that will connect with the hearts of many people. And I might say, what about you, Mr. Stormzy? He's connecting with many people as well. His constant harping on race is selling more of his music. And he does, listen, what's this? Just a minute. Ah, here we are. He told a bunch of school children that Boris Johnson is a very bad man. I've heard others say he told them he was a bad man. This is not appropriate. The 7-year-old kids admire this guy, and he goes into their class and tells them that the Prime Minister is a bad man. He brings up race in unnecessary and actually cruel ways. He gets offended when he's called out on his insults to everybody else. Well, I don't think Boris Johnson is a very bad man, but I'll tell you who I do think is a very bad man. It's this guy here, Stormzy. If you want to donate or contact, the information will be rolling over the Graniopteryx as I speak. Please like, subscribe and share because it does help with the algorithm. If you visit my channel on YouTube and one day discover that I've disappeared without warning, you'll still find me on BitChute or Minds. Just go to either of those platforms and do a search for Graniopteryx. If you're already watching this on BitChute or Minds, good for you. Meanwhile, if you're watching this on YouTube, remember that you must keep checking the subscribe and bell icons because occasionally they reset. Till next time.